They handed me the keys to a crumbling old care home like they were doing me a favor, while my sister walked away with the family trust, the condos, the inheritance. At that moment, I realized I wasn't just forgotten, I was discarded. Hi, I'm Mila. I used to believe that staying quiet meant staying safe, but what I built from that worthless place turned out to be the one thing they couldn't buy back. And when I revealed the truth at the family reunion, let's just say, no one saw it coming. Before we dive into the story, if you're enjoying these meaningful stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more. Now let's start the story together. They passed around flutes of champagne as if they were toasting to something noble. I kept mine untouched, fingers wrapped around the glass for warmth more than celebration. Legacy, they called it. I wondered which part of it I was supposed to be grateful for. The penthouse shimmered with curated elegance, white marble, ceiling-high glass, and the kind of lighting that made everyone look 5 years younger. Sarah, of course, looked like she belonged on the cover of a glossy magazine. Her blazer was probably more expensive than the entire furniture set in my apartment. Aunt Beverly, buoyant as ever, stood beside the lawyer like she was about to announce raffle winners. "Let's make this quick, darlings," she chirped. "Eleanor wouldn't want us dragging our heels." The lawyer barely looked up. One by one, the assets were read aloud. Sarah was handed the Chelsea condo, the Connecticut estate, and the remainder of the family trust. When he finally mentioned my name, there was a pause, almost like he had to double-check it was still there. To Mila Tran, the Cedar Pines residential facility in full. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered, "That old place?" Aunt Beverly, as if on cue, squeezed my shoulder gently and said, "Your grandmother believed in healing, sweetheart. Perhaps this is your calling." I nodded, said nothing. Later that evening, I landed in Medford, Oregon. The car ride out to Ashland was quiet, just the hum of tires over damp pavement and the slow realization that this wasn't exile. It was erasure, dressed up as generosity. Cedar Pines sat behind a rusted gate and a crooked sign. Its lawn had surrendered to wild weeds, and ivy clawed up the once white siding like it had been trying to escape. The door squeaked open without much effort. Inside, the air was a mix of old soap, dust, and something sour, maybe canned peaches, long expired. I walked through the reception area. A photo of Grandma was still nailed above the front desk, sun-faded, her smile blurred at the corners. In it, she held a clipboard and stood beside a man in a wheelchair. I stared at it for a while before noticing the desk drawer ajar. Inside was the original property deed, its edges curled and yellowed. My name typed clean across the top like a stamp of something final. I didn't cry, I didn't curse. I folded the paper neatly, slid it into my coat pocket, and turned to face the door. With one hand, I locked it behind me, not to keep others out, but to keep something inside me from leaving again. I didn't know what I would build in this place, but I knew one thing for certain. It wouldn't be for them. Chuang Hai. Forgotten. Not gone. The first thing I noticed wasn't the chipped paint or the cracked tile. It was the smell. Like hospital soap and loneliness, a mixture of things once sterile, now simply abandoned. Cedar Pines didn't hum with life. It ticked, creaked, and breathed in slow, uneven rhythms. The radiator hissed in the hallway like it was trying to speak, but had long since given up. I moved past faded murals, sunflowers in wheelchairs, handprints in pastel colors, ghosts of better intentions. The cafeteria was half lit, half full. An old woman looked up from her tray and squinted. "You're not the nurse, are you?" she asked. "You look too tired to be one." Her voice was thin but steady. I smiled. "I'm just visiting." Nurse Jenny offered a quick tour, pausing every few seconds to answer a call light or tuck in a blanket. "There's not much to see," she said with an apologetic shrug. "Most of the rooms are quiet after lunch, except Mr. Harlan. He's our philosopher in residence." Mr. Harlan greeted me with a raised brow and a chessboard missing half its pieces. Math teacher, he said, tapping his temple. Not retired, just repurposed. He offered me a plastic mug of tea and eyed me over the rim. You gonna sell us off like the last one did? I shook my head. Not this time. We sat quietly for a while, sipping tea that tasted mostly like warm water. Outside, the garden was overrun, weeds spilling from planters that once held tomatoes. A single bird sat in a rusted cage by the window. It didn't sing. That evening, I climbed up to the attic. Dust blanketed everything like it had claimed ownership. Tucked beneath a pile of expired newsletters, I found a sketch pad with Grandma's handwriting on the cover. Dignity plus tech. Inside were half-finished diagrams, ideas for call buttons that responded to touch and temperature, not just pressure. A note in the margin read, "Care isn't one size fits all." I brought the sketch pad downstairs and stood in the hallway. There, between the elevator and the old bulletin board, I mounted a small whiteboard. I wrote in thick marker, "Ideas welcome." Then I left a pen hanging from a string and walked away. The next morning, as I passed the cafeteria, something new sat on my breakfast tray. It was a folded napkin, and on it a drawing in pencil. Rough lines, unsure curves, but unmistakable. A heart connected to a wire. Ms. Berta didn't say a word when I looked at her. She just nodded once and went back to her oatmeal. The hallway lights flickered again that morning, but this time I noticed something else flickering. Something steadier inside me. The corridor smelled less like bleach now and more like fresh paint and coffee. Jenny had started brewing her own in the staff lounge. We joked it was stronger than the hand sanitizer. The small changes were stacking up. One corridor had been painted. The old jukebox finally played more than one song, and my makeshift lab, wedged between a supply closet and the former file room, was starting to look less like chaos and more like intent. I had a plan. Dr. Levi Singer didn't answer my call the first time, but when he finally picked up, his voice was dry as ever. "You've been quiet, Mila, and now you want machine learning for seniors?" "No," I said. "I want memory care that listens." He paused, then asked, "Is this about your grandmother?" "It's about the people like her that everyone forgets, until it's too late." By spring, Levi agreed to help me build a small prototype. Ethan Yu, an old friend from undergrad turned angel investor, sent a short email that simply said, "I believe in quiet revolutions." He wired the seed funds within 48 hours. We began small. Jenny wore the first wearable, a soft band that tracked heart rate variability and sleep rhythm. Mr. Harlan was next. His hands trembled less when he played chess. Ms. Berta, still silent, started humming while she drew. Old melodies, low and wandering like memories looking for a name. Weekly feedback circles formed, small chairs in the hallway, data charts next to hand-drawn, smiley faces. The whiteboard near the elevator now bore notes from staff and residents alike. Hallway light still buzzes. "Can we plant tomatoes this year?" The soup was better on Tuesday. I applied for a state research certification and a tech zoning license under the name Cedar Tech Foundation. The paperwork was dense, but my name was finally showing up on forms that mattered. One evening, after uploading a new set of sensor feedback, I checked the mail bin near the front desk. Most of it was junk, but one envelope caught my eye. Stiff, heavy paper with city records, seal stamped on the corner. It was a public notice, zoning application filed by Tran Family Enterprises. I read it twice. The proposed development? A wellness and renewal spa for aging clientele. Location? Right next to Cedar Pines. The application listed the project lead as Sarah Tran. I sat with it for a while. The wind outside brushed against the windows, soft and regular like breath. I remembered something Grandma once wrote in the margin of her journal. "Don't make noise. Make meaning." I closed the laptop, smoothed the envelope, and placed it in my desk drawer. "I see," I said out loud, softly. And I smiled, because this time I had the paperwork. I hadn't seen Sarah in 5 years. Her smile still looked like a photo filter. Bright, symmetrical, but a little too smooth around the edges to be real. The envelope had arrived 2 weeks ago, pressed and gold-trimmed, with our grandparents' names embossed in cursive across the front, celebrating 60 years of love. Inside was a folded invitation with a vineyard address, RSVP details, and the phrase, "Family always comes first." I'd left it on my desk, unread for days. But something about it lingered, like a song you hadn't asked for, but couldn't quite turn off. I drove out to the countryside alone. The sky that afternoon was wide and pale blue, the kind that made the hills look softer than they really were. The vineyard was wrapped in string lights and lined with rows of wooden benches. Servers passed out glasses of cider and charcuterie plates stacked with thin crackers and soft cheeses. Everything was tasteful, rustic chic, exactly how Sarah liked things to feel expensive without saying so. At the guest book table, I wrote just Mila. No last name, no title, no announcement. No one noticed me right away. That was fine. I found a seat near the back where the canvas screen showed photos of our grandparents over the decades, on road trips, at church, with grandkids climbing over their knees. My name didn't appear in any captions. Not surprising. Sarah took the microphone halfway through the slideshow. She wore cream and gold like she belonged in a magazine spread about power women who also bake. Her voice was steady but tight at the edges. "We're so grateful to be gathered here to celebrate not just history but the future," she said, gesturing behind her. "I've been working on a new project, something very dear to me, a wellness sanctuary for aging minds and bodies, a place of peace and renewal. And the best part? It's right here, next to land that's been untouched for years." Some people clapped politely. I didn't. Later, a cousin I barely remembered sat beside me with a small plate of mac and cheese. "Sarah's losing her mind over zoning delays," she said between bites. "Apparently, some foundation flagged the permit, cedar something, real small." I picked up a cracker and smiled. "Sounds frustrating." She nodded. "She's been on edge for weeks." I let that hang in the air while sipping from a plastic flute of lemonade. Around us, laughter rose. A toddler squealed near the dessert table, and someone passed a tray of mini cupcakes. Then the MC tapped the mic. "If anyone has a story about Grandma or Grandpa, the floor is open." I stood up slowly, smoothing the crease of my blazer. Sarah's voice caught mid-conversation at another table. I walked toward the front, steady, heels clicking lightly against the flagstone. The microphone felt warm in my hand, like it had been waiting. I looked out at a sea of polite expectation, some squinting faces, others already reaching for their phones. I cleared my throat and glanced briefly at the slideshow screen. The photo showed Grandma kneeling in a garden, dirt on her hands. A bright laugh caught midair. Behind me, I felt, rather than saw, Sarah rise slightly from her seat. A cousin near the edge leaned toward her and whispered, "Is that her?" I didn't name names. I didn't have to. The microphone settled in my hand like it already knew what I was going to say. Around me, the evening folded in. String lights flickered above. Soft jazz poured from a speaker hidden behind potted lavender, and the scent of red velvet cupcakes lingered in the air. Most people were mid-bite when they noticed I was standing at the front. "Hi," I began, simple and steady. "Some of you might remember me. Most probably don't. I'm Mila." The room paused, not in silence exactly, but in a hush, like air being held. "I wasn't planning to speak," I said, "but since we're talking about legacy, I figured I'd share a different kind." I let the pause breathe. Legacy isn't always what's written down in trusts or transferred between zip codes. Sometimes it's the small things, like helping someone remember their own name, or noticing when they stop humming to themselves. It's the kind of work that doesn't make the slideshow but lingers longer than photos. I could feel Sarah's gaze on me. I didn't look her way. "For the past few years," I continued, "I've been working with a foundation, Cedar Tech. We focus on elder care, on giving dignity back where systems took it away. We've partnered with local clinics and received state grants. We even had to flag a proposed development recently. It didn't meet zoning ethics for medical proximity." I paused just long enough. It was close to home, literally. A ripple moved through the tables. Forks paused mid-air. One uncle frowned, a cousin leaned toward another and whispered something. I didn't clarify. I didn't need to. "I've learned," I said quietly, "that real dignity walks quietly through the front door. It doesn't demand attention. It earns it. And sometimes it doesn't come with applause. Just peace." I nodded once, stepped back, and handed the mic to the startled MC, who fumbled with his note cards and muttered, "Thank you, Mila, for those thoughtful words." I walked down the center aisle while the room tried to rearrange its mood. Behind me, Sarah hadn't moved. Her cupcake sat untouched. Her smile, so sharp just hours ago, had dulled at the edges. Someone gasped. I didn't turn to see who, but I heard a soft voice murmur, "That's Mila's?" I passed the dessert table where a child had taken 2 cupcakes, leaving one slightly crumbled on the edge of the tray. I reached out, gently righted it, and kept walking. Sarah stood near the patio, frozen. I stopped beside her, not breaking stride, not raising my voice. "This place," I said, just loud enough for her to hear, "was never worthless." And then I walked out under the string lights, the night settling around me. Not heavy, not light, just right. Some people chase closure like it's a finish line. I never wanted that. What I needed was clarity, and I found it in quiet spaces no one else bothered to look. It was early spring in Ashland. Cedar Tech's glass exterior caught the late sun in soft golden streaks. Inside, the walls were lined with handwritten thank you notes from residents and families. No plaques, no portraits, just names in shaky cursive, taped carefully beside doors and desks. I sat in my office with the window cracked open. The breeze carried the faintest hint of blooming daffodils. Beside my laptop, a kettle hissed softly. The expansion plans were spread across the table. Colorado Springs, then Peoria. The foundation was growing, organically, sustainably, almost invisibly. Mr. Harlan knocked gently before letting himself in. He moved without his walker now, a short but confident shuffle. In his hand was a small cloth bundle. "You forgot this," he said. Inside was a wooden chess piece, the queen, worn, chipped at the base, but still standing. "You earned it," he added, before turning and heading back down the hallway. I smiled just for a moment and placed it on the shelf beside Grandma's old sketch pad, the one labeled Dignity Plus Tech. My phone buzzed. A voicemail. Sarah's voice came through, hesitant, softer than I remembered. I didn't really see. "I'm sorry. Can we talk sometime? Just to understand?" I sat still for a few seconds, the message fading into silence. Then I hit delete. I opened my notebook and wrote a line in the margin. "Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's who we bring forward." Before leaving, I walked the halls one last time. Nurse Jenny was in the training room, showing 2 interns how to recalibrate wearable sensors. The old bird cage had been cleaned and moved near the sunroom window. A new bird sat inside. This one sang. At the front gate, I paused. The sky had turned lavender and gray. I locked the gate myself, the metal cool beneath my hand. The wind brushed the edge of my coat, tugged gently at the loose page in my notebook. As I turned back toward the building, my eyes landed on the plaque beside the main entrance. Simple brushed steel, etched words that needed no flourish. In honor of those they tried to forget. I didn't strike back to hurt them. I struck back to remember myself. And I was finally home. I stood there looking at the plaque on the wall, simple words, no gold, no marble, and felt more at peace than any family title could have given me. I hadn't won anything. I had simply built something that mattered. Sometimes life doesn't hand us fairness, but it does offer us a choice, to carry bitterness or to create meaning from it. When we listen deeply, act quietly, and lead with care, we often build legacies more lasting than any inheritance. If this story touched something in you, an old memory, a quiet strength, or just a whisper of understanding, I'd love to hear what it meant to you. Feel free to share your thoughts or pass it along to someone who might need a gentle reminder. You don't have to shout to be heard.